The vast empty land of Australia attracts the loners, the people who don't need people. Down at the very bottom left-hand corner, where the southern seas from the Antarctic meet the Indian Ocean and the winds will knock you flat, stand three lonely little houses, regulation government issue. In one of them lives a bus driver from Bolton. He and his wife were 10-pound migrants in 1966, and in Western Australia he got a most unusual job. He now loves his isolation on this bleak edge of Australia and doesn't miss Lancashire at all. Ron Taylor is the Cape Lewin lighthouse keeper. In these calm summer months, he even has a few visitors to lead up them stairs as though showing off a rather tidy, stately home that's quite well lit from the outside. Do you get many heart attacks, sir?
No, we've had about two. Two that I know of, anyway. So we carried one lady all the way down. She'd had a heart attack a few years ago.
I know how she feels. Considering the fact that she's 90 years old, the place is in jolly good nick, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, pretty well. We keep it up to scratch with paint, and we have to keep it painted, but strangely enough, we're knocking the paint off the walls higher up because it's holding water. And, of course, it takes the echo off as well.
So we're coming up to the 7th level here, right?
Yeah.
Looks like a Swiss watch here. What is it?
Yeah, well, that's the old clockwork mechanism, and that was stopped in 1982 when they went over to automatic. But, of course, it still works. And we run it about once a month.
How many steps have we done, Ron?
176 plus another 8. We don't count the 8 here.
That's the non-public.
Because the people don't come up here.
Where the public mustn't come.
That's right.
Well, what sort of strength is this now here?
We've got two lights here. One is reserve. The main one is the one on your right here. And it's 100 watts, which will finish up through the lens at 1 million candelas, or roughly 1 million candle power.
What sort of range?
28 miles, because roughly that's the horizon from here, from this distance.
Now, this is one of the busiest sea routes in Australia, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we would say so. I mean, I don't know whether that's true or not, but we would say so. This is actually the corner that the ships turn here. Exactly. He's actually in the Southern Ocean here, and when he gets to this point here, he's actually in the Indian Ocean, which means he's just turned the corner, and vice versa. If he comes down from the Indian Ocean, he turns the corner here, and he's in the Southern Ocean, and he will go on to Adelaide or wherever on the eastern states.
Puts his left hand down a bit.
Yeah.
And runs along the bottom.
Yeah.
Ron, this is as far as you can go in Australia, isn't it? I mean,
well,
after this, your hat floats through.
That's right. Now, this is the most southwesterly point in Western Australia and also in the Australian continent. So you can't go any further southwest.
So what was the attraction of this job for you? Because, you know, you've been in Lancashire, coal mining, bus driving, nice, warm, closed communities. You come to this isolated place at the bottom of nowhere. How did you take to it when you arrived? It's a very lonely, solitary place. It's windswept. It's, you're subject to the most awful climate here.
That's right, yeah. It didn't bother us at all, not in the least.
So on a day like this, it's okay, but sitting in that little house with a wind screaming by here, not everybody would enjoy that.
Well, it can actually, I've seen it go off the scale on the anemometer at 75 knots. It's gone off the scale, which means you just can't stand up outside.
Ah. You've got to like heights, haven't you? I mean, I get a touch of vertigo, but...
well, if you don't like heights, you'd be no use for the painting. If you have to do any painting outside, and you didn't like heights, you've had it.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to apply. I'd rather drive that bus myself. What will you do when you retire from all this loneliness here?
Right, I'm glad you asked that one. We've just bought a block of land across the river here, an acre block. There's a house due down in a few weeks' time from Bunbury, a transportable, and we'll probably go living over the river.
So you're going to stay in this isolation?
Yeah, more or less, yeah.
But you'll have even less to do.
Well, with an acre of land, he'll find something.
So Ron Taylor, resisting the appeal of the cities and the lure of Lancashire, is about to retire to a mobile home on his nearby acre where the winds are familiar, and every night he'll be able to see those reassuring flashes from his old lighthouse.
There's Iris. Oh, yes.
Here's Iris. Iris Anderson from Gravesend in Kent.
Well, you can pass them to each other. You had that one.
There are few corners of the world where you can't find some soft-hearted English lady caring desperately for animals. This one dedicates her life to orphaned kangaroos, her kitchen strung with old buttoned-up pullovers, each with its wistful load.
We all understand that you haven't got...
This one's name, Iris.
That's Valerie and that's Glennis.
When her policeman husband retired, she established this animal sanctuary at Ocean Beach outside Denmark. She receives no support, charges no entrance fee, but this is an ideal petting park, so she has thousands of visitors. For 40 years now, she's been caring for joeys, baby kangaroos found in the pouches of mothers killed by shooters or by cars. And how many animals do you think you've cared for since then?
Well, we've checked on the amount of joeys we've reared, and up to 74, there's about another 11 or 12 years to go on that, isn't there? We've reared and found homes for 5,088 joeys.
You see, they've got a lot of character, but a lot of people regard them as vermin in Australia, don't they?
Yes, and the people who regard them as vermin would be shot, didn't they? Because they put these as, they put them on aeroplanes, and the coat of arms is kangaroos, isn't it? And yet they allow all the shooting to go on. And for pet meat, all these ones here, their mothers have all been killed for pet meat. Well, I get a bit indignant about that.
Yeah, yeah. What is strange is they're here in this enclosure, yet most of them seem to be pregnant. How did that happen?
Well, there's a big old one we call Casanova. He jumps that 7'6" fence.
Does he?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the first time he came, they were all innocent little does, and they all ended up being pregnant. And then from then on, every few months, he hops. Whatever new does we get here, it fascinates him, you know. I'm sure he keeps a watch out there in the bush when he sees any new ones come in, because it's not long before they're pregnant. I'm glad it's not contagious.
You see, what you're doing here, Iris, is you're looking after other people's, is it mistakes? Or?
Well, I'm not religious, but I believe in something, and I think that if I'm looking after what's been created, well, I'm as good as anyone that goes to church a lot, aren't I?
Of course you are.
That's my idea, anyhow.
Of course you
Come
are.
on, Katie. Here are some peanuts for you. Oh, it's nice.
So how old are you now, Iris?
74. Isn't it horrible?
Oh.
Still, I don't mind.
And what have you got now? How many animals have you got?
Oh, well, we've got 49 mothers down there with joeys, the Casanova, you know. Look at this lovely little thing.
Now, what other animals do you? I mean, they're animals that are immature and injured.
Yes.
You look after.
Well, there was an instant where I was 11:45 at one night, and Archie was asleep, but I was reading because I had to get up at...
Archie's your husband, isn't
he?
Yes.
Oh, I hope so. I sit in bed reading.
Right.
That sounds nice.
Okay.
Anyhow,
He hadn't come over the fence, so...
No. No. He was reading and the phone rang, and it was a lady from Walpole. Well, she'd found a kangaroo been hit by a car.
Wow.
And she said, I think the mother's dead, but there's a joey in the pouch. So we hopped out of bed and went 40 miles. It was an 80-mile trip. But we were glad because the mother was dead when we got there, and the baby would have been killed by crows in the morning.
You once gave a kangaroo the kiss of life, I believe.
Yes, that was sad.
Not everybody would want to do that.
I didn't mind. I'd rather do it than to a dirty old dragon bloke. I'd rather give
Yes,
it.
you got a point.
Oh, no, imagine.
Since you mention it, I think you got a point there.
God, I wouldn't like it. Would you?
Well, they've got pretty bad breath, some of these.
Oh, no, only when they regurgitate. They've got beautiful breath otherwise.
I see.
It's just like grass, clean, sweet grass. It's really lovely.
Is that?
Yeah.
Why did you have to give him her the kiss of life?
Well, a girl brought it to me one night. She travelled about 7 miles to bring it to me. She'd hit the mother. And anyhow, when just as I got to the door, you know, opened the door, and she was crying, and she put it in my arms. And the poor little thing took a spasm and went back.
Yeah.
And I felt its pulse, no heartbeat. And I said, look, dear, I'm sorry, I think it's dead. And she said, oh, don't say that. And she burst out crying again. So I was embarrassed for her. I didn't know what to do. So I grabbed hold of it, and I'd only just learned how to do that, you know. What do you call it? Kiss of life.
Kiss of life, yeah.
And anyhow, I kept it up, and I thought, oh, it's hopeless. It's not going to live. It couldn't live. But do you know that dear little thing, all of a sudden, as though its little chest, I thought it was going to blow up and explode. You know, I got the shock of my life when it was alive.
It worked.
Yeah. I was thrilled to bits, though. I don't know. I felt I was really somebody, you know. It's a nice feeling to save anything, isn't it?
I mean, somebody once left a human baby on your doorstep.
Oh, yes, that was terrible. And it was a lovely little baby, but I didn't want a baby because I was already poos, the woofle. And
Poo.
you know what it is? They regurgitate the food up.
Is that it? It's a sort of belch?
Yeah.
By George.
It's horrible, isn't it?
Isn't it? Turns the air green.
Didn't think you wanted to think it was
Ooh,
me.
it's not you.
No, but the...
So anyhow, you had this baby.
Yes, and it was only 7 months old.
Well, didn't you adopt it like all the rest of them?
Oh, no, I rang the police and I didn't want a baby, not a human one. But it was a lovely little baby, and I was very sorry, but the girl was... Oh, go away, don't do that again.
Did you discover what the story was then?
Yes, a girl and a boyfriend had the baby, and they didn't want it because they wanted to go on a working holiday.
Yeah.
And they knew I minded unwanted animals, so they thought they'd put their little baby in my care. But it went back to the grandmother, so it had a happy ending. But I didn't want a baby. I had one, that was enough.
Now, what about when you have a day off? You ever have a day off? Christmas time?
We have Monday and Friday off. I go to Weight Watchers Monday and Friday. We go shopping. But
it's all those peanuts you've been eating, you see. That's what does it.
But we come back at... I don't eat them. The kangaroos do. We come back at... we're always sure we'll be here in plenty of time to 2:30 or 3, you know.
You've never been tempted to go back to Gravesend and see what Kent was like?
I would like to, but then I think of all that money for the fair, I could build more houses or something for the animals. Because after a holiday, you think when a holiday's over, you think, God, all that money's gone and I've got nothing for it.
It would be a nice experience for you, but it's very expensive.
Yeah.
Well, you got a BEM anyway, didn't you?
Yes, that was kind, but I would have rather had powdered milk or something for the babies, because you put a medal in the drawer and forget about it, don't you?
Oh.
Well, the government don't help you.
Don't they?
No. That's what makes me wild. They give grants for a lot of stupid things, like they've got one over east gave them so many thousand, it's in today's paper, for a female wine bar. Well,
A lesbian wine bar?
I suppose, I never thought of that.
Ah.
No, just as female wine bar.
I
I
see.
haven't got a bad mind like you have.
All right.
No.
And you think you should have had it?
No, no. But, I mean, what a stupid thing. My kangaroos could do more good than...
See, it's strange that, I mean, a farmer would regard you as as breeding vermin, really. And they would want to come in here with a gun, wouldn't they, and shoot the lot.
Well, it's a funny thing you say that. Do you know a lot of farmers' wives, their families have grown up and left home and they get all the joeys from me and rear them?
Yes, it's strange.
And
Someone
the
was telling me
farmers are
this.
lovely.
They shoot adult kangaroos and they save the joeys. So it's...
But there's so many farmers that won't have people shooting on their property. Kangaroos do harm to the fences, but the only harm they do the crops, they don't eat it all, but they, as they're running around and tearing around, they, you know, break all the crop up with their tail. You can imagine them jumping in a crop of wheat or oats. Well, you can't blame them.
It does seem, Iris, that there's a certain type of slightly dotty English lady that's ready to devote her life to animals, isn't there?
Yes, I'm one of them. And, well, you can't blame them because animals repay you with love, but people don't. I like animals better than people for that reason.
Do you? Well, you haven't had bad luck with people, have you?
Oh, no, there's not a lot of nice people, but there's a lot of nasty ones, and there's a lot of nice Pommies, and there's a lot of nice Aussies, but there's a lot of nasty ones of each of them, isn't there?
Well, what about, haven't you run across a nasty roo?
No.
Never?
No, never. Never in my life have I found a nasty animal.
See, the reason why Casanova isn't going to be rough with you is because you're acting as a sort of madame for him. You're providing him with all
his little
his
harem.
concubines.
Yeah. No. Betsy's saying I'm a madam of a brothel for kangaroos. That's nice. You're awful. Yeah, he's making me embarrassed now. No.
Anyhow, he hangs around outside because he knows that you keep all these nice little female kangaroos here.
Well, Archie said he doesn't blame him because he said all those women, like all those does, free board and lodging. He doesn't have to go out in the bush and look for his food. He said he's got it made, hasn't he?
Yes, he has.
You can't blame him, and he's a nice kangaroo. Although he gets a bit nasty with me because he won't let me near him now since I slapped him.
Since you slapped his face? Yes.
Yeah, but you've got to do something. You can't, you know, let him get away with everything, can you?
It strikes me he does quite well, actually.
Yeah. But I don't know how long he's going to be. He's been here for quite a few years. You wouldn't think he'd be able to manage so well, would you? But he's bringing reinforcements in now.
You wouldn't think he'd be able to jump over a 7-foot fence, I must say.
Well, I will tell you this. When he comes in, we've seen him jump and he tears through the bush and he jumps with all the vim and vitality. But when he goes out, he doesn't.
You have to open the door for him.
No, he waits a few weeks before he goes. He's got to recuperate, I suppose, you know.
Poor old Casanova, he's carried out of here on a stretcher.
No! No, he isn't, but
There once was a man who sailed for Australia, flying the flag of the boxing kangaroo. And he stole the cup that belonged to America. That was the tale of Australia too.
Down came the Yankees to sail against Australia. Italians, French, Canadians, Kiwis and Poms.
Other pommy loners set about making their fortunes, and some get famous on the way. All this excitement's been created by a boy from Perryvale School in Ealing, who set out in the classic way, selling newspapers, and became an apprentice sign writer. He then climbed onto the Western Australian property roller coaster from boom to bust and back again. He was a paper millionaire at 21 and booked for having bald tyres on his rolls. But he was already in the fast lane.
Steak and kidney, could have 'em for dinner. Kookaburra could have the last laugh too.
Bond's the name, Alan Bond. When he won the America's Cup, he became not just another Perth mega-millionaire, but the saviour of Australia's honour and a beacon for its newfound pride. Over Overnight, he was a folk hero and his family a national dynasty. Australia's answer to the royals.
And now, the Executive Chairman of Bond Corporations Holdings Limited, Mr. Alan Bond.
Among other things, he's the world's #1 manufacturer of airships. He paid $422 million for Kerry Packer's media empire to add to his own radio and television stations and newspapers. His corporation controls half Australia's vast beer market, and it's the largest wine and spirits company.
Now the people who make Pittsburgh's famous Iron City beers are part of the Bond team.
He's one of the biggest property developers and into coal and gold mining, nickel, cobalt and oil exploration.
We formed an international division too.
He has major investments in Hong Kong and China and property and banking in England.
We're building up
This West London boy was Australia's first billion-dollar borrower.
in Asia and the Pacific.
Today, one of Fremantle's tourist targets is the dingo sign Alan Bond painted when it was all beginning. His new home in the posh Perth suburb of Dalkeith has another decor, a blend of Versailles and maples. As is traditional, he's gone heavily into art, from French Impressionists to a pair of Michael Jackson's white socks in perspex. And on his dining room table, the shining memory of True Glory, a replica of the America's Cup made for £38,000 by the London jewellers who created the original for 100 guineas back in 1851. Eileen Bond's gift arrived just as America won back that cup, though despite the defeat, Bondy remains the tallest poppy of them all. Listen, it's not bad for a sign writer from Hammersmith, is it? Was it Hammersmith?
Yes, it was. Of course, I wasn't, so I was only 13 when I left England, so
Yeah.
I didn't learn to paint signs until I came to Australia.
Do you think you could have achieved what you've achieved in any other country, or has Australia, and Western Australia in particular, got some sort of formula?
No, I don't think so. I think that
You'd have done it anyway, wouldn't
I
you?
really believe I would have, yes.
Do you feel 100% Australian, or are you still a Pom at heart?
I think that when I get off the plane every time I go to London, I feel like I'm coming home. So I don't know whether you ever lose the roots of your founding country.
Yes.
And I feel that is those, maybe in later years I'll return to England, who knows.
So where do you go from here? When you do you ever stop buying up the world?
I don't know whether I want to buy up the world, quite frankly, but I do want to see our company expand to a real international force. I think that I intend to spend a lot of time on my art collection and my sculpture collection, but I think that there may be an enormous amount of opportunity to carry on doing what needs to be done, particularly in the ASEAN region. There are 2.4 billion people, and Australia is the Switzerland of the Pacific Rim. So in this Asian growth market, and it's the only growth market left for the next 100 years, really, I'm looking at China's 75-year plan. Now, whatever effort I might put into the development of China, it's going to take the fullness of my life to see that to happen.
See, there are constant reports that you've got political ambitions.
Well, I think every businessman has an obligation to stand up. I don't have direct political aspirations as such, but I believe that when something isn't right in a country, as a major industrialist, you have to stand up and state your facts.
You're sounding as though you could be persuaded to join the new right.
No, I don't. I think the new right's too extreme. Quite frankly, I don't approve of the methods. I believe that there is a place for unionism in this country, and in most industrialised countries of the world, I think there is. I think the working man has to be represented, and that is a system to which is not going to be changed anyway. You've got to face the reality of it in the foreseeable future. And so I think what we've got to try and do is make that better, the existing system, so we can work within it.
But you are now taking on the unions. I mean, you're making public pronouncements about them. What have they been doing to you?
Well, absolutely. I think that you have to stand up. You can't give in to pressure. And certainly some of the unions in Australia aren't prepared to abide by the laws of the land.
But they've been holding a pistol at you, haven't they? I mean, they're refusing to finish your hotel down on the coast here.
Well, that's quite correct. We get some problems there, but when we look at it, though, we've still built a 25-storey hotel in 22 months from the beginnings of the foundation. I don't think you could do that anywhere else in the world, so they haven't done a bad job. But the question is, can we do better?
See, I've heard stories of explosions down there, of arson and that sort of thing, so it's getting rough.
Well, we've had one case of that, and that was quite a serious case. I mean, 49 sticks of gelignite were placed around a crane, and it was blown up. Now, I can't say that was the union that were involved in that or not, because we never did find the culprits, but one can suspect it.
But you're a pretty tough bloke in yourself. I mean, you're not sheepish about facing a bunch of unionists who don't like you.
Not at all. I was a member of the Painters Union for 25 years. I kept my membership even when I went into other businesses. I feel able to... I don't have any problem walking around any of our industrial properties or factories, and I can talk on the floor level.
It's a first-name country, isn't it, really? I mean, if the Prime Minister is Bob to people, and you're obviously Bondi.
Absolutely. And I don't feel that should change either. I think it is a new country. We don't have the great history that England has, nor do I think England should change, really. I think it's lovely to have something that you can look back and see how things have been for 500 years, and they've preserved that integrity, which is quite fantastic.
Does Australia, with this quality of life, like its tall poppies? I mean, you're the ultimate tall poppy, really.
Well, some do, obviously. I mean, I think that but there is a section of the community that is anti anyone that is successful, and whether it be a success in business or anything else. A politician is successful will attract adverse comments, which is unfortunate. We still have in Australia that knocking, we call it knockerism,
yeah.
Where if there's someone that's been successful, even if it's a sportsman, you know, if you're a sportsman and you don't do well the next game you play, they say, oh, terrible fellow,
and they go for the jugular, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Winning the America's Cup awakened a new sort of nationalism here, didn't it? Was that a good thing?
I think so. I mean, we won it for the first time in 132 years. It doesn't really matter who wins it after us. It was the first win that was terribly important. And they'd held that cup, and it was often considered to be held where the rules were bent to suit the holder of the cup, you at your club. And so winning the cup was very important for Australia. It did unite Australia.
I mean, it was the Prime Minister takes the first drink for years. People weep in the streets. You're a hero of a mini-series on television. It was an event such as Australia hasn't seen for perhaps ever.
Well, it was different. It certainly was. It's not since there wasn't a unity since the last World War. Personal thing, because it was the small Australia, the small country fighting that great might of America. And
what did it do for you? I mean, it was good for your business, I'm sure. What did it do for you personally?
Well, I got a great sense of satisfaction, quite frankly, being able to bring some credibility to Australia's technology, to its management skills, and to the sheer determination of all the crews involved in it for so long. I mean, it took us nearly 14 years to win that cup.
You're one of nature's competitors, really, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
It's a challenge, a daily challenge. You relish that?
Oh, yes.
Does that mean that you can do no wrong now? I mean, will Bondi always be a goodie from now on?
Oh, no. The first time you lose the next race,
yeah.
they soon forget.
What is it about Perth that makes it spawn all you multimillionaires? 800,000 people. How does it produce all these mega-buck people?
Well, I'm not sure that they're really any more here than they are anywhere else.
Well,
they're more visible.
More publicity or something.
They're more visible, I think.
So, yeah.
There are a couple of things about Australia that is different to other parts of the world. There have been no capital gains taxes in this country up until just recently, which has allowed you to develop things and retain that capital base. Now, even now, gold tax, there's no gold tax. That means that if we go out there, discover gold, build a gold mine, all of the rewards of that are tax-free. So that encourages people to go out and peg some ground, and you don't have to have much schooling. I mean, you can be a labourer one day building a brick wall, and a few of your friends will say, well, let's go gold mining, and you can go out into the bush here, peg a piece of ground, get a $5 miner's right, and whatever you find in that square of ground, that's yours. Now, that doesn't happen in very many places in the world today. So there is still part of, like, early America here. It is still the Wild West. It's a very, very big place. And when you think of it, Western Australia, you know, 24 times the size of England and 3 times the size of Texas, and only 1.4 million people here. There is the opportunity to go out there and start a business at 19 or 20 years of age, and in 5 years or 10 years, if you're successful, you'll be well known. You'll have made you many millions of dollars if you've done it well, and you haven't necessarily had to have any, it didn't matter what school you came from, necessarily what education standards it was, were you the best person in a very competitive market, because Australia is a very competitive market because it's small, and Western Australia is even more competitive. So if you can succeed here and do well, you will succeed, probably succeed anywhere in the world.
You don't have to look far for examples. Just down the road, the home of a boy from Belfast whose father was a carpenter, his mother a factory worker. The family came out as 10-pound poms in the early 50s, but now travel in style. For 20 years, they lived on a cold water estate of wood asbestos homes put up for migrants outside Perth. Alistair Norwood, with his Indian model wife Jerry, owns this £6 million mansion on the Swan River and made the long, sure climb from those bleak Belfast back streets up into this sunlight. Tall, muscular and determined, he's narcissistic enough. In their upstairs gym, the Norwoods pump iron for hours every day. But Alistair's a driven man and has enormous push. He's every immigrant's dream of success. A boy who came from nowhere, sold ice cream in his local cinema, and now, mainly through sales motivation techniques, is a retailing phenomenon. His splendid home was bought by Blue Denim. It's a story of rag trade to riches by way of jeans. Your father was a Belfast carpenter, and he came out here in the mid-50s when you were 6. Now, when he comes in and sees this Beverly Hills palace here, what does he make of it?
Well, I think he's pretty proud, and I think he knows what was involved in getting to this point. It just didn't happen overnight, but I think he appreciates it.
How did you get off the ground? I mean, you started as a bank clerk, I believe.
Yeah, when I left school at the age of 16, I worked in a bank, and then I had a few other jobs, and at one point I was working as an accountant in a department store, and I had a dear uncle across from Belfast, and we hadn't seen him since I was sitting on his knee. So he took me out for a drink this night, and we were still there drinking at 3 o'clock in the morning when the owner of the place said he'd like to sell it. My uncle decided, well, how would you like to run a disco nightclub, as it was called? I thought it was a great idea. So when we left there at 5 o'clock in the morning, we'd bought it. So as it turned out, it wasn't such a good investment because the place went down and dear old uncle did his money, but it gave me a taste for being in business, and we were able to do well in the next business, and he got his money back, and that was sort of the beginning of my involvement in business. So from there, at least that got me into the clothing business, and then I started the Jeans West chain of stores.
You see, you've succeeded phenomenally in a sort of a service industry, and Australia's not noted for service, is it? How do you indoctrinate your staff?
Well, we started off with what we call our countdown session, and it goes through over an exchange of ideas between, say, the two of us about what we achieved yesterday, what did we learn yesterday, and what do we intend to do today. So we share our experiences, and we set our targets for the day, and I'll learn from you, and you'll learn from me.
I've got $3,370 left to go, so I'm very pleased with my multiples. What I have to do is maintain the multiples at that high standard and just keep persisting throughout the day to achieve my dollar figures.
I had a slow start, however, I didn't let it get me down. I just kept persisting and just kept in tune with the whole day, and I ended up picking up about $300 at 5 o'clock.
It's actually something that they look forward to as well. So on the way to work, you know, instead of thinking about the hassles of home, they're thinking about what am I going to be saying at the countdown session, and it's a sort of a mind-focusing session to bring their mind from the outside to the day's tasks, what they intend to do on the day.
Okay, well, I'm going for the day and night is $1,500 and 65% multiples, because the multiples are very strong for the last 2 weeks.
And you reward them, do you, your salespeople? And for...
They're well paid, but none of our staff are actually on commission. So they don't work on commission. They work on... they're a pretty motivated group of young individuals, and we take a lot of pride in that, the fact that they're doing it for customer satisfaction.
Now, this is a sort of brainwashing. I mean, sounds Japanese. They don't do exercises at their desks in the morning.
No, there's nothing brainwashing at all about it. And there's no exercises by the desk in the morning. It's just that...
haven't got any of those machines.
We're working on those machines.
How is it that entrepreneurs like yourself flourish in this Perth climate here, that you with the Bonds and the Elders and the Courts and the Elliots?
Well, I think one of the advantages of Australia, and particularly a place like Perth, is we don't have the establishment to hold us back. And you're not fighting through those people who are already entrenched in place, and you've got to get them out of the way to get in there. So we haven't got the establishment here, I think. So that's possibly one advantage. And the second thing is that I think it's part of the Australian makeup that we feel as though we're as good as the next guy, and we don't have that class thing that there are other people who are born to riches and therefore they belong to that area. We believe that, you know, anybody can make it and they're entitled to be it. Everybody's as good as each other, you know. Nobody talks to each other, to another person in a subservient sort of a way or in a looking up sort of a way.
But I mean, you're the establishment to come, aren't you? You know, I can see that.
Well, I suppose we all like to entrench ourselves, but
yeah.
That wasn't certainly not my intention. My intention to start off with was to survive. And now once you survive, then you start thinking, make yourself a little bit more comfortable. And so I haven't got to thinking about being part of the establishment.
What are your ambitions now, incidentally?
My ambitions now? My ambitions now are probably different to what they were, say, 5 years ago, where I was probably still trying to build the dollar. It's probably more quality of life now, and life's more focused towards my family and my children, who are at school age now. So that's probably where my intentions will be going in the next probably 10 years.
You see, you're the establishment to come, aren't you? I mean, you've got an establishment-type home already, so people are going to be struggling to emulate you. They probably are now, I suppose.
Well, I haven't thought of myself as being establishment at any time, but
Bowler
I suppose...
hat, umbrella, I can see it happening.
I'd like to think that maybe in 100 years the Norwoods will be considered to be establishment, but I hope that we're not in the position of holding other people back. I'd like to think that we... as we become deadwood, maybe that we can use what finance we have to help somebody else get it on.
Nobody seems to be held back in Perth, where that quality of life is as good as you can find anywhere on Earth. Another Pommy achiever who came here to win, Peter Briggs, skippering his yacht Hitchhiker, which he sailed in the '83 America's Cup trials, and his wife Robin. He left Streatham at the age of 8 and once here set about collecting old newspapers and bottles to sell for useful small change. Even then, he says, he had an overriding ambition to make money and was a paper millionaire at 17. Then, in the Poseidon crash, he went bust, but sort of succeeded again. This evening, he's entertaining a few less successful friends, new to this buccaneering, high-rolling life, who are still trying to cling on to reality. Peter belongs to the junior branch of Perth's famous financial privateers. He started out as a carpenter, which pleased his mother because, as she said, Jesus Christ was one too. Then he bought land, and by the time he went bankrupt, he was a millionaire, which taught this thrusting workaholic that he had to enjoy life. So he took up sailing. After going bankrupt, Peter Briggs became a stock market promoter, borrowed some $4 million, went into gold mining and various enterprises, like collecting sufficient cars to fill 2 motor museums. He's now driving back into the money again, relentlessly pursued by the Australian taxmen. They're trying to chop you down, anyway.
Oh, yes, I think so.
But you don't seem to be very worried about this. I mean, it seems to me this is a criminal charge. You could finish up in the slammer.
Well, that is a possibility, but I believe we will win. I think that justice will be done.
How do we sleep nights at the moment?
Well, very, very well. Very well. We've just had a success with the tax department, and we've sued them. We've sued the tax department themselves, the very people in the tax department, for fraud, abuse of power. Now, it's the first time it's ever happened in Australia, and they've been trying to sling it out of the courts, and they're losing. And I believe we will win, and we will win substantial damages against them.
You seem very sanguine about it, I must say.
Well, I mean, I don't think you can do anything else. I think you've got to let life go on, and you've got to live your life.
You see, it could be that anyone who is scrupulously honest in business here doesn't have the total respect of most of his peers, because it's a sort of buccaneering business society, isn't it?
Well, it's very competitive, too.
But if you go bankrupt in England, there's a bit of stigma attached to it, let alone have people chasing you for tax money. But here, you can shrug it off and nobody cares.
Well, I think the authorities certainly care. But I think that you can live in the society. I don't think people really mind whether you've been broke or whether you're having a fight with the tax department. I think life goes on. I think Australians are very acceptable to that sort of attitude.
Yes. You see, Perth has the friendliest and the gentlest atmosphere, I think, of all the Australian cities, yet it also has the country's most flamboyant and speculative business community. Now, I wonder why this is. If you say it's the climate, I'll give you a karate chop. I mean, why is it that Perth is the flamboyant centre of Australia now?
I don't know. I suppose we're all in one town of 1 million people, and we can't get out, so we can all be observed. But I understand that per capita we have a higher percentage of entrepreneurs.
I mean, Alan Bond was one of your peers, and in fact you were running neck and neck at one time, and then he got away, didn't he?
Yes, substantially.
Yes.
No, Alan's done very, very well.
But it's curious that Perth should produce all these dynasty-type millionaires, because we're not talking Australian money, we're talking Texas-style money.
Yes, but they're all, the most of them from overseas. Alan was born in England, and Mr. Holmes was born in Africa.
Yes.
So a lot of us, I think, feel that we're determined to make good in a new country, and the opportunities are here. They really are.
So I once heard you say about someone, he's worth 5 or 10 million, but he's never really made it. What have you got to be worth before you've made it here?
I think $5 or $10 million is not real bad.
That's okay.
That's okay. But I think, there's plenty of people here worth in excess of $20 million.
Yes. So have you made it by that criteria?
Oh, I think I'm somewhere along the path.
You've diversified your interests quite extraordinarily. You've got all these cars, you've got these various big homes, you've got businesses, you're still in gold mining.
Yes, we've diversified. We're in boutique breweries and...
boutique breweries? What is that?
Well, we're very small breweries, and not like Swan Brewery or anything like that.
Designer breweries, yeah?
Handmade beers and lagers.
I see. So what possessions have you accumulated in this roller coaster ride of yours?
Well, technically none. Of course, they're all owned by family trusts.
Yes. But loosely speaking, you've got...
Loosely speaking, we have a nice car collection. And,
how many cars?
150 cars and motorbikes.
What is this Bentley worth?
Well, it depends where you're selling it, of course. It's probably worth up to $500,000.
$500,000? £250,000?
No, not that much. Not in pounds.
200,000.
Yes.
And you've got another 150 odd.
Mm.
Well, that's a few quid, I suppose.
Yes, of course, they're not all like this, of course. There's a lot of very ordinary cars.
This is your piece of resistance, is it?
Well, it certainly is, yeah.
She's a smasher, I have to say. And what's the object of the race tomorrow?
Well, it's a reenactment of the classic around the houses races that they've had over the years in Western Australia. They've had all these little country towns would have around the house historic races.
Now, this 60-year-old banger that you're going to risk my life in tomorrow, she's a goer, is she?
Oh, yes, it's going to go like a rocket.
not quite Monte Carlo, is it?
Not really, no. It's really only a reliability run. And, we're not supposed to let our hair go. Get mad.
But I'm told you all get marcher, actually.
Yes,
you chaps.
one always sort of.
With those go fast caps on and everything. One of Peter Briggs' motor museums is in the historic country town of York, where he also owns an hotel and part of the main street. This is his annual Flying 50 race around the houses, where 50 vintage cars cover 10 laps flat out through almost unprotected streets. My 60-year-old Jaguar SS100 was a classic cream machine just removed from the museum, whose looks were rather better than her behaviour. Nevertheless, for an elderly lady who should have been resting indoors, she motored impressively, despite the lack of recent motor racing experience being disguised by both of us. As you'd expect, Peter had the finest machine, that supercharged 1930 bull-nosed Bentley, 2 tons of British craftsmanship, which could still touch 130, but was not easy to stop. I could see him in my mirror, crouched over the wheel of his great bellowing monster, looking exactly like Mr. Toad. I was well placed and quite fancied my chances. Then suddenly, I got a black flag. On the last lap, the stewards called me in. I couldn't understand what had happened. So I obediently turned off into the pits, where the stewards told me I'd been disqualified because I wasn't garbed to the wrists. For this so-called rally, all the boy racers were tarted up in flame-proof tracksuits, significant badges and gloves with holes in them. Mr. Toad, of course, wore the full Grand Prix rig, whereas I, like any self-respecting television man out in the bush, was in a safari suit. You see how Australians behave when the competition gets tough.
Alan Whicker. Alan Whicker. Here he is.
Still, they gave me a medal anyway.
Driving the SS100 Jaguar.